About an hour in, we pick up ace-king offsuit in the small blind. There are straddles on nearly every hand, including this one. The hijack raises to 50. The cutoff has been playing on the wilder side. He lives up to his reputation with a 3-bet to 150. We've got a couple of options. I use a 50-50, then I poll the audience. The right answer ends up being pretty clear. We have to punish the opponents. I put in the cold 4-bet to 500. It should send a signal more clear than the wow. The hijack picks up on it and folds. The cutoff is a gambling man. He makes the call for 350 more. We're heads up out of position in what's already a 4-figure pot. The flop comes Jack 10 deuce with 2 spades. We've got a gutter with 2 overs and a backdoor spade draw. There's a decent amount going on with our hand, but I expect the cutoff to at least occasionally have strong holdings, like sets of jacks and 10s, in addition to overpairs. I definitely like to make it to at least a turn card. I check to ensure that we don't get blown off of our potential. This isn't a Costco, so we won't be getting anything for free. The cutoff bet's 330. Even though I haven't put out as many YouTube videos lately due to playing a lot, I can still afford that amount. I make the call. Ideally, we can drill a queen of some sort. The turn is the 8 of spades. It's not exactly what we wanted, but we at least pick up a draw to the ace-high flush, and almost equally important, we have a key blocker. I check to the cutoff once more. I wouldn't expect him to bet that frequently for value, given that this should be a scary turn card. I can definitely have some flushes that I would have played this way. The cutoff can't be stopped. He puts in a suspect bet of 600. I've got 18-10 total. I don't really want to just flat the 600. I'm not entirely sure what the cutoff has. I know what he doesn't have though. With these loose aggressive opponents who bet, sometimes you've got to put them to the test. That's what we do. We get a count of our stack to confirm that we have another 12-10 on top of the cutoff's bet. Our all-in doesn't get snap called. I'm glad to have chips in front of me at least a little longer. We still would like to see a fold. Otherwise, we're going to need some help in the form of a spade or queen. The opponent takes his time. It's a big decision. Finally, he makes the call. It hurts to see it, but all hope isn't lost. We've got to have some outs. It's a pot well over $5,000. The river is another jack. It's extremely disappointing. I turn over what's become complete air. We beat absolutely nothing. The cutoff reveals that he has pocket 10s for a full house. It's a monster hand that we ran into, like I'm sure some of you suspected. Except, he doesn't actually show his cards at all. He looks at them in disbelief because he doesn't have the winner. Our ace-king offsuit is somehow the best hand and a massive all-in. It's rare that a semi-bluff shove on the turn gets called, doesn't improve, and still gets the win. Maybe today is our day. We're up a few thousand. The opponent would later tell me that he had king-queen offsuit with a spade. He was drawing slim against us and gets exactly what he deserves for calling our cold 4-bet light. We've got pocket aces again. This time we're on the button. I 3-bet to 1500. There's no nick game going on or anything like that. Alex just has a hand that he wants to play. He's tired of me 3 and 4 betting people. He puts in the cold 4-bet himself to 4800. Andrew folds immediately. There are a couple of graphical errors in this hand. The first one is that it says Alex only 4-bet to 3800, which is incorrect. As we can see, there are 4 yellow 1K chips out there, a purple $500 chip, and 3 black $100 chips. Also, his stack is incorrect. It says Alex started the hand with 38,000, but he has 4 pink 5K chips, around 15 1K chips, 12K in black, another 5K or so in purples, and 1,600 in green. Altogether, he has somewhere around 53,000 total to start. We've got him covered. I want to get as much in now as possible. I 5-bet to 11,000. Perhaps the 4-bet from me earlier is still in Alex's mind when I had aces against him in that hand too. He might be thinking that I can't always be strong, though I have been today against him. Alex calls for 5,200 more. We're heads up in position in a 5-bet pot with the opponent completely dominated. The flop comes 10-7-4 with 2 clubs. It's close to as bad as it could get. The opponent checks. The main hands that I put my opponent on are pocket kings and queens, ace-king, maybe ace-queen suited. I'm not too thrilled when I look down to realize that we don't have the ace of clubs. It makes it a lot more likely that our opponent could have a flush draw. Because of that, we're not going to be down betting. I bet 13,000 in an attempt to get all the chips in the middle right now. I don't expect to be up against pocket 10s very often. I'm rooting for a jam so that I can call. Alex actually has about 42,000 total. He's got one of the best poker faces in the game. He gets a count of his inventory. In my head, I'm repeating the same monologue over and over. Rip it, dude. Rip it. After almost exactly a minute, Alex comes to a decision.
All in announced from Alex, a snap call from Brad.
I see Alex's cards, and it's about the worst case scenario I could have imagined. The best case scenario would have been pocket kings, ideally with no club. Ace king or ace queen of clubs would have been better as well, but now we're playing a pot that's over $100,000, and my opponent can hit any club or a 10 to win. I've gone through so much pain in this new studio. I haven't won a single all-in outright with cards to come. Even though I played multiple huge all-ins, they've just all gone the other way. Despite that, I want to make sure that we're not chopping this. We're either going to have max joy or absolute max pain.
Come on, Brad. Whatever you want. I just go once.
And Brad wants to go once for blood.
I got in a large deficit early. I got all the way out of it to be up 20,000, only to put it all on the line here with just a 57% chance of winning. I'll either be up 70,000 on the day, or I'll be down about 40,000 to book another massive loss in this room. I can barely stand to look at the run out, though I'm in the 8 seat, and I'm the first player at the table to see the cards as they come out. The turn is the 7 of diamonds. I'm still not able to breathe properly as I'm getting the sense that it's just being set up for me to experience ultimate agony when a club comes on the river. Each second feels like an eternity. I want to see a red card so badly just so that I don't have to sweat as much. I'm not sure what I did to deserve it, but I see the 5 of clubs here before everyone else, and my heart completely stops. This is one more massive loss of mine that everyone will be talking about all over social media. It's one more time that I'll leave Austin with less than I came in with. One more time, I'll have to explain to family and friends that they don't need to worry about me and everything's okay. Except, this time is different because it's the 5 of spades that comes out. We win a pot over $100,000 to be up, way more than I've ever been up in a session before. I was so mentally prepared to see a club that it took me a long time to realize that it's a spade that the dealer actually put out. It's not quite the biggest pot that I've ever won. It's certainly the most satisfying just because of everything that's led up to it for me. I needed to win to restore some confidence and have some good memories in this room. We get a count of both of our chips just to make sure that I have them covered, and I do. Shortly into the session, my name is at the bottom of the leaderboard, but it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. We're up at the top of the leaderboard now with a stack over $100,000. We actually have quite a bit more than what's listed. We've got closer to $120,000, and I'm up $70,000 on the session. I'm proud of myself for not giving up after getting stuck early on. The cards finally cooperated and the big pots went my direction. The session ends shortly after without me getting involved in any other interesting hands. I'm under the gun +1 with King 8 offsuit. I put the blind 80 out there, so we're playing 10, 20, 40, 80 with a $20 big blind ante. There was 170 in the pot before the cards were even dealt. The small blind raises to 280. His name's Ping. I played with him the last time the vlog ventured into 10, 20, 40 territory. He's a high stakes cash game and tournament player with over $2 million in live earnings and several major final tables under his belt. Ping has watched a few videos on the channel and was also in Mexico with our group for the 25K heads up event a few months ago. We always chat when we see each other and we're friendly. He's got a good vibe about him. I didn't straddle to 80 to just fold to a single raise when I'll be in position the rest of the hand. I call, we're heads up. The flop comes King 9-6 with 2 diamonds. We've got top pair and a backdoor straight draw with not much of a kicker. The opponent checks. I don't want to get blown off a hand with value. I check back mostly for pot control and a bit for deception. The turn is the 8 of hearts. We improved to somewhat of a hidden 2 pair. There won't be a free river for anyone. The small blind bet's 420. I now have pretty much the best hand that I'll ever have, aside from pocket 8s, and sometimes I'll have either 10-7 or 7-5, but often I'll bet those types of draws on the flop. I definitely would have bet earlier if I'd flopped a set. There are too many draws and bad rivers that'll either give my opponent the lead or make it difficult for me to go for value. I want to get more money in on this street before any card like a diamond, heart, 10, 7, 5, or 9 come out. I raised to 1100. This is on the smaller side, but I'm not 100% sure that I even have the best hand. Ping just calls, so I can rule out him having any straights. There's almost no chance he'll have a set either. With a pot this large and 1 card to come, I'm praying to the poker gods that we get a blank. I couldn't be more relieved when I see the deuce of clubs on the river. What an amazing run out and situation that we found ourselves in. I'm sure the raise on the turn looked extremely suspicious after I checked back the flop. There are just so few value hands that I'll have and way more semi-bluffs that have now missed. Small blind checks. He's seen me overbet big with missed draws in the past. I'm gonna do it here for value. I bet.
3,500? 35?
If I get called, this pot will be well over $9,000. I don't think that I've ever actually bet this much for value without going all in. In this case, I've got piles of money behind. Ping is deep in the tank. I started the hand with 20,000 and Ping has me covered. If he somehow shoves here, that'd be the most disgusting thing that I've ever experienced in poker. It looks like he has a very difficult decision though. He's probably replaying hands that he's seen me play in the past, whether it's in person or on video. As more time passes, I'm rooting more and more for a call. It's really difficult to piece together exactly the type of hand that he'll have. Could he be holding king jack or king 10, or maybe queens through 10s? Anything better, I think he snap calls. Even for a higher stakes game, this is a big bet, so no one appears to be considering calling the clock. A full 3 minutes of Ping trying to solve the puzzle has gone by. Finally, the opponent comes to a decision. He puts in calling chips. I turn over 2 pair. Ping, understandably, isn't too happy to see it. King 8 offsuit helps me take down the second largest pot that I've ever won. I've run really well against Ping. At some point, he's going to win a huge hand against me, but I beat him for a big one in the previous high stakes session we played, and once more here, so unfortunately he's 0-2 on the channel so far. He's a seasoned player who handles it with a good attitude though. For the first time in my life, I'm up just over $10,000. I'm going to pick out pocket 9s in the cutoff. A few more pros have entered the game to replace some of the recreational players, so it's not quite as good as it was at first. I raised to 100. One of those new pros 3 bets to 460, which isn't very nice of him. It's a large sizing, still, we're both deep. If we can flop a set, maybe we can win a big one. I call for 360 more, we're heads up in position, the dealer puts out 10-9-3 with 2 spades, we've got middle set on a coordinated board. I'm trying to contain my excitement as the opponent reaches for chips. He down bets at 360. I'm debating whether or not we should make our move now. We don't want to see any spade or really any overcard to the board because they'll either complete possible straight draws, potentially give my opponent a higher set, or possibly scare my opponent from wanting to put more money in the pot if he has queens for example, and an ace or king comes out. It's best to try and get as much money in now as possible. I raise to 1,000. The opponent doesn't appear to be considering a fold. It looks like he's either going to call or raise. I wouldn't be able to get my chips in fast enough if he does raise. If he has a set of 10s, it's just not our day. The big blind calls. He probably has some type of strong draw or an overpair. The turn is the 8 of diamonds, queen jack, jack 7, and 7-6 make a straight. The big blind checks. Despite our hand being downgraded, we can't allow the opponent to see a free card. I'm sticking with our plan to target overpairs and big flush draws. I increased the bet sizing to 3,000. I don't exactly want to get jammed on, but we'll certainly be calling a shove if the opponent rips it. Instead, he calls. If he had us beat, he would have gotten it all in by now. The fact that he didn't makes me very confident that we've got the best hand. The only holding that I could see the opponent playing the same way up to this point that beats us is exactly queen jack of spades. Even then, I still think he probably would have shoved the turn. The river is the 6 of clubs, putting 4 to the straight on board. This has become a huge pot. We have $7,010 behind. The big blind checks. It's not likely that the opponent has a 7 in his hand, and we've already ruled out a set of 10s in most queen jack combinations. Even with 4 to the straight on board, by process of elimination, I'm confident that we've got the winner. If we want to bet, our best option is to shove. The opponent could still possibly call us with any overpair if he thinks that we're bluffing with a missed draw like king jack or a missed flush draw. Earlier on in my poker career, I'd occasionally play scared and check back a hand like this one on this board. Not anymore. I jammed for over $7,000. If we get called, this will be a $23,000 pot, which would be the biggest pot that I've ever played at Bellagio. We don't get snapped, so I'm feeling better and better about the situation. The big blind is perplexed. He isn't sure if I'm bluffing or not. The nuts have drastically changed since the flop came out, yet here I am, firing big on all 3 streets, saying that I'm not afraid to play for stacks. The big blind puts in a handful of yellow calling chips. We excitedly turn over our middle set. It's good. We get the absolute maximum to win the biggest pot that we've ever won at this property. There's no better feeling in poker than using all the information available to you to make the most money possible. After we get a count of the chips, the entire pot comes our way. The pro who we got is steaming and immediately picks up the scraps that he has remaining. We're up 13,000 on the session. If we left right now, it'd be my second biggest win ever, but we're not leaving. The straddle to 800 is on. Dylan picks up king-queen offsuit on the button. He's a high-stakes pro from Las Vegas who I've actually played with a handful of times and included in multiple vlogs. He's very talented and has an extremely bright future in poker. He's only in his early 20s right now. Dylan raises to 2,500. We've got ace-jack offsuit in the small blind. You're never really supposed to be flatting from the small blind when the straddle's on. You're supposed to be 3-betting or folding. If you call, it allows the players behind you to have a really good price, and you generally don't want to be playing from out of position against multiple players. You also don't want to set it up for the players behind you to put on a squeeze play. Folding a hand even as good as ace-jack offsuit is completely reasonable, even against the button open, but We see Doug accidentally fold out of turn, so I don't need to worry about him coming along behind us with a call or 3-bet. I just call, which is totally fine to do when the straddle isn't on and only one player is left to act behind you. We're heads up against the button. The flop comes Queen 10-3 with 2 diamonds. We've got a gutter with 1 over. I check. Dylan likes the flop with top pair. He's not going to let us see a free one. The button bets 4,800. I'm not in the mood to let go of our hand. We've got a decent amount going for us. Ace high might even be best sometimes. I make the call to see if we can drill a miracle card, giving us the nuts. The dealer is a friend of mine named Kevin. What do friends do when times are tough? They come through in the clutch, giving you the exact card you need to win a massive pot. Clutch Kevin, that's what we call him. I can't tell you how happy I am to see the King of Hearts. I check because this will typically be a better card for the pre-flop aggressor, and it certainly is a card that improves Dylan's hand to top 2 pair. The button won't typically be putting us on ace-jack offsuit after we just called the raise pre-flop. He's not overly worried as he bets 10,800 for value. We've got just over 66,000 in front of us and need to figure out the best way to get as much in there as we can. A jam is reasonable. I might do that as a bluff in some instances, but I don't want to scare the opponent off of a top pair type of hand or even some 2-pair combos. I go with a relatively small sizing and 25,000. There's still enough room for Dylan to come over the top and jam for 40,000 if he doesn't have much and wants to turn his hand into a bluff. I'd actually expect him to potentially jam straights, sets, and perhaps even king-queen to get value before a scare card comes on the river that completes one of the draws that are present. The opponent takes his time to process the situation. Eventually, he calls for 15,000 more. This is a high-intensity scenario. We're in a $66,000 pot. We've got 40,000 effective. I've never rooted so hard for a blank in my life. The river is the deuce of spades. We couldn't have gotten a more ideal run out. We've got 60% of a pot-sized bet left in our stack. There's only one play to make at this point. Like Eric Clapton on stage alongside Mick Jagger, we rip it with the stones. Now all we can do is wait. There's over $100,000 in the middle one more time. The pot is ginormous, and Dylan is getting over 2.5 to 1 on a call. As strong as his hand is, there aren't really worse hands than king-queen that I'll be playing this way and jamming for value, so Dylan kind of only has a bluff catcher with his top 2 pair. A call here will nearly get me unstuck for the session, which I had little hope for before this. Dylan is deep in the tank. A minute goes by. 2 minutes go by, and the opponent still hasn't come to a decision. 3 minutes have elapsed. Still no decision. I'm not moving at all. 3.5 minutes go by. Then Dylan finally makes the call. We turn over the nuts. It's a pot of 146,800 that's coming to us. It's by far the largest pot that I've ever won, and the only one that I've ever won over 100,000. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe buttons yet, what are we waiting for? This one is a huge confidence booster that changes what seemed like an insurmountable deficit to overcome into one that's way more manageable. I've been playing for 7.5 hours. When I pick up Queen 6 suited in the hijack, I open to 120. The button calls. He's the same opponent from the last hand. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes 10-4 deuce with 2 spades. We've got a flush draw, 1 over, and a backdoor straight draw. I bet 200 to potentially take it down without having to make a hand. The button isn't going to let me. He raises to 600. This isn't a particularly great situation to be in. He could be doing this with some kind of better flush draw than me, like ace-3 or ace-5 of spades. It's only 400 more though. I call. The turn is the 8 of spades. We drill the 3rd nuts. I'm still not sure if it's good. I check to see how the button's going to play this. He's not easing my concerns. He fires for 1,300. I guess the button isn't worried at all about the flush draw getting there. I make another call, knowing that I could be drawing completely dead. The river is the 5 of diamonds. I check. This pot has gotten really big. I'm not all that comfortable. I'm even less comfortable when the button fires for $4,000. This is absolutely insane. I have the 3rd nuts, but I feel like I have a bluff catcher. If I call, it'll be a pot of over $12,000. It'll break the record for the biggest pot that I've ever played, which was $10,000 when I lost that one a few hours ago. If I win, I'll be up $3,500 for the session and $4,600 total for the day. If I lose, I'll be in the hole about $9,000 on the session. Nearly every time that I made a big river call, I've been wrong. Somehow, I haven't learned my lesson. I just don't have Amy to fold a hand that's this strong, so I brace myself for the bad news one more time, and I put in calling chips. The opponent's quick to turn over Jack Deuce of spades for a slightly smaller flush. He might like Jack Deuce suited a little too much. He gets totally punished for playing it this time. I have him notched to win by far the largest pot of my life. Excuse the language, but what a fucking wild ride today has been. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I'm all the way out of the hole. This has been the most taxing cash game session that I've ever played. I'm completely mentally drained. I can't possibly express how happy I am to come back from the dead like that and actually have a solid win. I have to give credit to the opponent because he loses a big cooler, but knows this is a huge moment for me, and he's very cool about it.
Same, bro. Thanks, man.
The deck has its own plan for me. I'm dealt pocket jiggities in the small blind, it's another straddle pot, and one player's gone, so it's six-handed at the moment. The player first to act opens at 200. This is annoying because it's a larger than normal size raise, and it's coming from an early position player. The cutoff calls. I don't like any of my options. I'm certainly not folding. I'm on the fence about calling or 3-betting. 3-betting is probably slightly better. Instead, I call, which pretty much turns my hand into pocket deuces. I'm not going to feel comfortable going forward unless I hit a set. The big blind calls. The under the gun straddler in the 2-seat puts in a tiny 3-bet to 850. This is super odd. He probably should have made it closer to 1400. Surprisingly, the initial preflop raiser and the cutoff both fold. I'm not going anywhere. The stack to pot ratios are going to potentially get very strange though. I call for 650 more. The big blind also calls. A lot of the time, he's going to have a small to medium pocket pair or some kind of suited connector type hand. He has a 10k stack and can really decimate mine if we happen to get into it together. He comes out ahead. I can't think of a much better time than this to drill a set. Unfortunately, we don't run quite that good. The flop is 7-4-3 rainbow. This is such an uncomfortable situation to be in since I've got something really good, but one or both players could have me beat. I check. The big blind checks, which he'd almost for sure do with sets, or he could even conceivably do this with 6-5 suited. Under the gun likes the price that he made it pre-flop. He sticks with it and bets 850 again. I don't see how I can fold to a bet that's less than a third of the pot. The problem is that while under the gun may have a hand like ace-king, in fact, that's what I think is the most likely hand he'll have given his line. I'm worried if I call it could look weak, and the big blind might put in a big check raise whether he has a strong hand or not, since this board crushes his range. What's almost an equally bad scenario is if I flat and the big blind calls behind me with a hand that has equity like 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, pocket sixes, pocket fives, or any hand with 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw. If I call, there won't be any cards other than a jack that I'll want to see, particularly if it goes 3 ways to the turn. I feel super handcuffed. The one thing I have going for me is that I could have also smashed this flop given how I played it pre-flop. I do something a little unconventional and slide in a raise to 2000. It's a small sizing so I can still get away from it if the big blind has a set and wants to play for a much larger amount than the under the gun straddler is capable of. If the big blind has anything other than a set, he's pretty much going to have to fold since I put in the check raise and he still has a 3-better behind him who also put money in. If the big blind folds and the under the gun player jams for 2400 more, I'll have to side call off. I really hope that's not what happens though. If the big blind folds, I'm very relieved to see that. I have one less opponent to worry about, but I'm not out of the woods yet. I expect the under the gun player to rip it in if he has pocket aces or kings. My read on the situation is that he genuinely doesn't like getting raised, but it's only 1150 more for him. He's getting a good price. He calls, which we've seen him do in previous hands with very little value. I still wouldn't be surprised if he has ace king or ace queen, especially if he's suited and has a backdoor draw. It's down to heads up. The turn is another 3. It's great to see the dealer keeping it low. It's now a $7,000 pot. The opponent has about 1/3 of a pot-sized bet left in his stack. There's a good chance that he has ace high, but there's also a decent chance that he has a pocket pair better than mine. If he does, I guess this is just my time to double him up. I don't see how I can get away from this. Wish me luck. If I don't win this pot, I'm going to be in a brand new, deeper hole than the one that I spent hours trying to get out of. A big part of me wishes dinner was just 15 minutes earlier because then I would have been able to avoid this quicksand situation. This will be about a $12,000 pot if I get called. A lot of time is going by for this player to make his decision. Surely if he had aces or kings, he'd call without any hesitation since he's getting almost 4-1. I also think that he would have bet more with those hands on the flop. As each second passes, I'm more convinced that he has ace high, perhaps with a heart draw, but maybe not. Not only could I have the best hand, I could be a big favorite. I just can't think of what he could possibly have that's beating me that he wouldn't have snap called me with. We already know that the 2-seat doesn't like folding. He's racking up more time in the tank than Mark Cuban. After 56 seconds goes by, the player finally makes the call. It's one of the biggest pots that I've ever played, but do we have the best hand? I think we could. I'd like some insurance though. The dealer puts out the miracle jiggity. I know that I joke with you sometimes, but not here. We make a full house in order to have what's almost certainly the best hand in a 5-figure pot.
It's a good river.
What do you get?
Hey, did I need the river?
You needed the river.
I suppose that we might have gotten lucky, and if that's the case, I feel bad about it for multiple reasons. I'm thrilled to have won, but I just don't like getting it in as an underdog, and I know how painful it is when others get lucky against me in similar situations. This is a little odd though, because the opponent doesn't seem too upset to have gotten sucked out on in such a massive pot. He's taken this better than anyone that I've ever seen take a bad beat before.
Nice catch.
Thank you.
That was a nice catch, yes.
There you go.
Hey, I had top house going into the
Your top house?
top house.
How are you tanking then?
I had 7.
How are you tanking then when I shoved?
How was I taking? I just planned. What do you mean? What do you want me to do? We're going to get it all in anyway, aren't we?
This is maybe the most ridiculous conversation that I've ever had after a hand. He's saying that he 3-bet small pre-flop with pocket 7s when he could have called to close the action, which I don't think that I've ever seen anyone do. He tank called the flop raise. That's pretty reasonable with top set. Then tank called the turn with the second nuts for almost a full minute in a timed game. After I shoved all in, he was getting 4-1 on a call. If what he's saying is true, then I don't feel bad about sucking out on him at all, because it sounds like he was planning perhaps the most epic slow roll in the history of poker. What's way more likely is that he was behind the entire way and wanted to save face, so he made up something that made absolutely no sense. If he told me he had aces, kings, or queens, I would have been way more inclined to believe him. 3-betting pre-flop and tank calling the turn all in with top boat isn't a very credible story. I guess it doesn't matter too much anymore. The guy's been a fun person to play with aside from this incident. We'll never know for sure whether what he's saying is true or not. What's more important is that the stack is all the way up to $18,500. It's time for another bomb pot. Every player puts in $100 each. We're playing 7-handed at the moment. If we win, we'll have gotten all the way out of the $6,400 hole that we were in. We look down at pocket queens in the big blind. It's normally one of the worst times to pick up a premium pocket pair because, like I said earlier, one pair hands rarely win at showdown in bomb pots when there are so many opponents, so you typically have to improve to 2 pair or better. And we do. The dealer puts out Queen Queen 9 Rainbow. We flop quads with 700 in the middle and not a damn worry in the world. I've never had quads in a bomb pot before, certainly not during a high stakes session. The only concern of mine is how are we possibly going to get paid when we've got everything. Small blind checks. There's no way that we'll be betting when I'm second to act and all the queens are accounted for. I check, hoping someone will get out of line. No one bites, it checks around. The turn is the 8 of spades, at least putting a flush draw on the board and completing a possible straight. The small blind checks. I'm a patient guy. I can't let this check through again though. I make a small bet of 200 to get things going. I wouldn't be too surprised if this folds around. I actually think it's the most likely outcome. All hope isn't lost. Rob takes 2 black chips from his stack and calls in middle position. The hijack and cutoff fold. The button, who we've tangled with multiple times, is considering his options. I told you earlier he makes aggressive plays at strange times. This would be amazing if he raised here. I don't want to do anything that might tip him off that we've got the absolute nuts. Still, in my head I'm thinking, please do something wild. He comes through and raises to 1100. This seems like a bluff since we've got all the queens. I don't know if he'd raise with a straight on this board, or maybe he has 9s full or 8s full. The small blind folds. I was originally thinking that I may not get any customers with my $200 bet. Now that I've gotten called and then raised, I'm thinking about the best way to stack 1 or maybe even 2 players. There's no reason to risk scaring anyone off. We don't need to re-raise for protection. I flat the 1100. Rob can't justify calling for 900 more. He folds. It's down to heads up with a guy who I know is capable of taking huge risks if he sees an opportunity to win a pot. It's the perfect setup. The river is the 7 of clubs. It doesn't change much since Jack 10 was already a straight. The button has exactly 5,000 left in his stack. We have him covered. The pot is only 3,100, so it could be tough to get everything. I don't want to risk this checking through since it's highly likely that the opponent is bluffing and may shut down after I called his raise on the turn with another player behind me. I put out a fake blocker bet of 600 to appear as if I'm weak and trying to get to showdown cheaply. I've already seen multiple times today, including earlier in this hand, that the opponent has no aversion to raising. We just need him to take the bait here. If he has air like a missed flush draw, he may make a last-ditch effort to try and steal the pot after seeing a weak-looking bet. If he has a really strong hand like a full house, or possibly even a straight, he'll probably think that I have tripped queens and he can raise for value. Almost no matter what he has, he'll feel some inclination to make it more. He takes the black chips that he's shuffling in his hand, adds it to a much larger stack of black chips, and then raises to 2,600. I don't play these stakes that often. It's tough to flop quads. and even more rare to get raised twice in the same hand while having the absolute nuts. This is an unbelievable feeling. Let's just take a second to enjoy this and hit the like and subscribe buttons. We've made the maximum. Yes, the button still has another 2,400 in his stack, but there's no way that he can call a shove, even if he has pocket nines for what we know is the second nuts, because it's too likely that I'll have queen 9, queen 8, or queen 7 for a better full house, and I wouldn't bluff or re-raise with anything worse. Still, we have to go for it. I put in the inevitable all-in re-raise for 5,000 effective. The button can't believe it. He must not have been raising as a bluff on the river because he doesn't snap fold. I get the sense that he knows he's beat. He's got to see it though. He tosses in a calling chip. We've officially made the most that we could possibly make. We never find out what the opponent had. It must have been either Jack 10, pocket 9s, or pocket 8s. They're all pretty similar in this instance because they don't beat the hands that I'm representing. It's an insane $13,000 pot that comes our way. Earlier on, it seemed like I was destined to lose every chip that I had in front of me. I was stuck several $1,000s and a favored to be down 10,000. We got some magic in 2 separate hands with pocket queens to now be up 6,000 on the session. The day is completely turned around. It isn't over either. I make a straight flush in a 3-way all-in PLO double board bomb pot for piles. I see a royal flush dealt on board, and I win all 5 of the sessions that I played to get $4,000 back of the money that I lost on my first trip. I still have about 11,000 to go to get even at this property, but I'm looking forward to the challenge. We're about 7 hours into the session when we pick up Jack 10 suited on the button. This hand is particularly fun to play because it can make 4 separate straights that will all be the nuts. I raised to 30. My buddy Kevin took a break to use the restroom, and our mutual friend and poker crusher, Ronnie Barda, took Kevin's seat to hang out and sweat the action for a little bit. The big blind calls, we're heads up in position. Hit the like button on the count of 3 if you want to see some run good. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The flop comes King, Queen, 9, all spades. For the first time in my life, I flop a straight flush. It's the first straight flush of my own that I've ever captured on the vlog. This is awesome. The big blind checks. It's not a flop that'll connect too well with his range, and we can't possibly lose the hand. I check back. The turn is the ace of clubs. It's another card that should be better for us. The big blind checks. He may have complete air. I want to build this pot, but the best way to make money is probably to give the big blind one more opportunity to bluff at it. I check again. The river is as unbelievable as it gets. It's the ace of spades giving us the royal flush. We've got the best hand in poker with the best suit. Some people go their entire lives without hitting a royal flush. Daniel Negreanu famously has never hit one. This is even more insane since this is a 6-card royal flush, which I've never heard of anyone doing ever. I've actually hit a few royal flushes before, but this is the coolest one. The big blind checks. There's almost no way that he has anything too strong, especially since the 6 highest spades are all accounted for. I want to at least make some money and possibly induce a bluff. I bet 10, the absolute minimum. The opponent doesn't seem like he even wants to pay that amount. It'd be a huge shame if he folded. Fortunately, he calls.
Royal flush.
$10 for a royal flush is going to do it.
Despite hitting multiple royal flushes in the past, this one is very special, and we got paid, well, sort of. The big blind would later tell me that he had a king and would have paid up to $20, so I guess we didn't quite make the maximum.